Hamilton punches Norris after Barcelona qualifying. It's your fault. Stay until the end to see Lando Norris' brutal reaction. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. The heat in Barcelona wasn't just radiating off the asphalt that afternoon. It was in the air, between drivers, inside the garages, in every single heartbeat reverberating through the paddock as qualifying reached its boiling point. The circuit had already delivered surprises earlier in the session, but nothing could have prepared anyone for what unraveled in Q3. As Lewis Hamilton surged onto what appeared to be his most potent lap of the entire weekend, the tension built with every apex he nailed, every millisecond he shaved. Everything pointed toward a front-row lock-in. Data analysts watching in real time were already predicting a stellar P2, with his pace visibly superior to all but Verstappen's, a clinical blend of aggression and precision. His entry into Sector 3 was textbook. The grip was there, the power unit was delivering perfectly, and his car danced through the trickiest corners with a smoothness that hinted at something special. Engineers held their breath. Mercedes' pit wall went silent, glued to the telemetry. Turn 12 came and went. Then, like a ghost crossing the track, a papaya blur emerged. Lando Norris, just exiting the pit lane, drifting slowly into the racing line without warning, without clearance, without a hint of urgency. It wasn't an outlap. It wasn't a flyer. He was meandering through Sector 3 with seemingly no situational awareness. In that critical instant, Hamilton had a choice: slam into the McLaren or lift. He chose the latter, jolting the brakes to avoid disaster. The delta shot up. The lap was gone. No purple sectors. No front row. Just raw, infuriating disbelief. He pushed through the final chicane, crossed the line, and saw the time that told the entire story. From a potential P2 to a bitter P6 in the blink of an eye. 4 precious grid places stolen by a single moment of track placement. The cameras zoomed in. His hands didn't rise in celebration. They slammed down on the wheel. He muttered something into the radio, voice tight, clipped, biting. No congratulations. No analysis. Just rage. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. As he returned to the pits, he didn't even stop for the customary weighbridge instructions. He ripped his gloves off with an intensity that made the mechanics around him flinch. No helmet removal. No small talk. He bypassed the Mercedes engineers entirely and charged down the paddock, still in full race kit, sweat dripping, fury burning hotter than the Spanish sun. He didn't wait for anyone to hold him back. He didn't check for cameras. He didn't ask questions. He wanted one thing: answers. Straight into McLaren territory he stormed, no hesitation, no pause. The garage fell silent as heads turned, realizing who was approaching. Hamilton, a legend of the sport, storming toward a fellow Briton with fire in his eyes. The moment he spotted Norris, it erupted. Tension snapped into chaos. Voices clashed. Cameras rushed to capture it. Microphones perked up. What the hell was that? Hamilton bellowed, not caring who heard. You destroyed my lap, mate. What were you even doing there? Norris, stunned, stood his ground. But his reply didn't come fast enough. Hamilton wasn't finished. You saw me coming. You had to know I was on a flyer. Why would you be there, right there of all places? His voice cracked not from weakness but from pure, unfiltered emotion. The frustration of knowing his machinery, his timing, his execution were flawless, only to have it derailed by a fellow driver's lapse. Norris, trying to explain, began to speak, but Hamilton cut in again. You ruined it. And for what? A slow outlap? No blue flags? No spotters? Come on, man. That's not just poor timing, that's careless. That's disrespectful. His tone wasn't sarcastic or theatrical. It was raw. Personal. They weren't just two drivers now. They were two men, both British, both immensely talented, both carrying the weight of expectation, but only one of them had just lost a potential podium from someone else's mistake. People around them weren't sure whether to step in or stay back. McLaren team members shifted nervously. Some Mercedes staff were now arriving, trying to calm Hamilton, urging him to return to the garage. But he wasn't moving. He had crossed a line and wasn't ready to step back. The cameras zoomed tighter. Fans around the world watched live, social media exploding with clips and commentary, hashtags trending before the session had even ended. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. In the post-session interviews, Hamilton was composed, at least on the surface. But the words still carried the aftershock. "I was on one of the best laps I've done all weekend. We had it lined up. It was there." But when someone parks themselves on the line like that during Q3, there are no excuses. You don't ruin someone's lap like that. Not at this level. His eyes were sharp, his voice low, his message unmistakable. Norris, visibly uncomfortable in his own interviews, attempted to walk the line between apology and self-defense. "I didn't mean to get in the way. I thought I had enough room. It wasn't intentional. But yeah, I'll have to look at the footage again." But his voice betrayed him. He knew. Everyone knew. Intentional or not, the damage was done. Inside McLaren, the mood soured. Team radio logs were reviewed, fingers were pointed, questions flew through the air. Why hadn't the spotters called it? Why wasn't Norris told who was approaching on a flyer? Why didn't the team communicate properly? The answers weren't coming fast enough, and the damage control had already begun. Inside Mercedes, heads were shaking. Engineers ran simulations to estimate exactly what the lost lap would have delivered. The numbers were devastating. Hamilton had been en route to a P2 start, possibly even challenging Verstappen, given tire degradation patterns and track evolution. All wiped away by one preventable moment. FIA officials reviewed footage late into the evening. Team principals were called into closed-door meetings. Drivers were briefed about situational awareness and safe re-entry protocols. But the fans already had their verdict. Forums lit up with debate. Analysts dissected every angle. Former drivers weighed in on broadcasts. Some defended Norris, calling it a rookie misjudgment. Others sided with Hamilton, labeling the move reckless and avoidable. This wasn't just a qualifying blunder. It was the ignition of a rivalry no one saw coming. Hamilton, the veteran legend still capable of blistering laps, and Norris, the young star with a rocket of a car and growing pressure on his shoulders. And now between them, a scar. A moment that won't be forgotten. A confrontation that will follow them to the next race, and the next, and the next. In the garages, the crews tried to reset. But the energy had changed. Something had cracked. Not just in the standings, but in the dynamics between drivers. Mutual respect had taken a hit. Apologies, if they came, would be formal, surface level. The deeper wound would remain: Hamilton's fury, Norris's guilt, and a qualifying session that was supposed to be routine, now immortalized as a flashpoint of fury in a season already charged with electricity. Lando Norris had barely unclipped his helmet strap when it started. The air in park firm was already charged with the usual tension of qualifying, the kind that crackles between exhausted adrenaline and unresolved ambition. Mechanics moved silently. Engineers whispered into earpieces. Photographers hovered, waiting for a shot that might define the story of the weekend. And then Hamilton approached, his stride direct, his body language unmistakable, tense, confrontational, boiling beneath the surface. Norris turned, catching Hamilton's glare. He didn't flinch. He didn't need to ask why the seven-time world champion was walking toward him with fire in his eyes. The sarcasm came instantly, delivered with the cocky ease of a driver who'd long since learned how to play mind games in public. "Check your mirrors before blaming everyone else," Lando smirked, the corner of his mouth curled with deliberate provocation. "I didn't even get a blue flag." Hamilton's response wasn't immediate. He took a step closer, his jaw tightening, his breathing shallow but measured, the kind of restraint that only just barely held back an explosion. "You were told," he growled, voice low but furious. "You knew I was on a flying lap. That wasn't a mistake. That was deliberate. You screwed my lap. You cost me the front row." Lando's smile faded, but only slightly. He stood his ground, shoulders squared, defiance flashing behind his eyes. "If you wanted the front row," he fired back, "maybe drive faster. Don't cry about traffic like you're new here. This is Formula One, not Formula Wine." That was it. The spark that lit the powder keg. The tension between the two drivers, already strained from years of generational rivalry, snide interviews, and social media jabs, detonated into a raw public showdown. Mechanics from both teams surged forward. Mercedes crew members moved instinctively, placing themselves beside Hamilton in a protective semicircle. McLaren staff pushed toward Lando, forming a barrier of their own. Tension rose like a wave, threatening to crash over the paddock. Security staff, already on high alert due to the media's growing frenzy, stepped in. Arms went out. Voices were raised. Journalists began sprinting toward the scene with cameras raised and recorders already running. The verbal assault didn't stop, it escalated. Hamilton's words grew sharper, louder, angrier. An insider close enough to hear the exchange swore Hamilton accused Norris of pulling a Verstappen, deliberately interfering in rivals' laps to secure a better grid position for himself, exploiting the chaos of traffic during the final qualifying runs. It wasn't just a technical insult, it was personal. It brought back memories of past flashpoints, of controversies Hamilton had endured, and sometimes initiated, during a career defined by both brilliance and turbulence. Norris, undeterred, took it even further. According to another witness, Lando leaned in and said, "You're living in the past, Lewis. You're not untouchable anymore. Stop pretending it's still 2020." The words landed like a punch, not because they were loud, but because they echoed a sentiment whispered more and more around the paddock, that Hamilton's reign was no longer absolute, that the new generation wasn't interested in playing second fiddle to the legends of yesterday. And then, just as the situation threatened to spiral completely out of control, a new figure stepped into the blast radius: Ferrari's team principal, Vasour. He had been giving a media interview just meters away when the shouting started, and despite being known for his calm and measured demeanor, something in him snapped. With the eyes of the media watching, Vasour didn't try to defuse the situation quietly. Instead, he delivered a stinging rebuke, not to Norris, but to Hamilton himself. "This isn't how a world champion behaves," Vasour said flatly, loud enough for nearby reporters to catch every syllable. "He should focus on driving, not yelling like a teenager in the paddock. This isn't a playground. This is Formula One." The air went colder instantly. Even those not involved in the confrontation felt the temperature drop. Vasour's tone wasn't theatrical. It was dismissive, cutting, final. And for someone of Hamilton's status to be publicly called out, not by a rival driver, but by a rival principal, was something rarely seen in this sport. Hamilton froze. His eyes narrowed. For a long second, he said nothing. Then, through clenched teeth and without looking away, he reportedly muttered, "You're one to talk about conduct," a quiet, venomous reference to Ferrari's long list of controversial tactical decisions, including accusations of intentional blocking, strategic interference, and rule-bending during previous seasons. It wasn't just a clapback. It was a reminder that no one in Formula One wore a halo, no matter what logo was stitched onto their chest. Mercedes didn't issue an official statement that night. But Toto Wolff, ever the strategist, ever the protector of his drivers, moved swiftly. He intercepted Hamilton within minutes, guiding him into the shadows behind the team's hospitality unit. No cameras. No microphones. Just hushed voices in a corner, lit only by garage glow and tension. Whatever was said in that brief, intense meeting, it didn't end with a handshake or a smile. Hamilton walked away alone, head down, hands clenched into fists. Wolff remained behind, arms crossed, deep in thought. The FIA, perhaps predictably, remained quiet, at least on the surface. But behind the scenes, their press team scrambled. Investigators were dispatched. Footage was already being reviewed, not just of the on-track qualifying session, but of the altercation itself. While the statement released to the press used vague terms like reviewing conduct, sources confirmed the investigation extended beyond the shouting match. The FIA wanted to know if Norris had ignored team instructions, if blue flags were missed, if telemetry could confirm a deliberate delay in acceleration during Hamilton's flying lap, and whether the fight was merely a symptom of a deeper calculated act of sabotage. Within hours, social media exploded. Clips of the confrontation flooded Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit. Fan bases took sides with ferocity. Hashtag Team Lewis and hashtag Team Lando trended globally. Memes flew. Speculation raged. Former drivers chimed in, some defending Hamilton's fury as the mark of a champion wronged, others calling it an embarrassing display of entitlement from a man unable to accept the rise of the next generation. What was undeniable, however, was that this wasn't just a heated exchange between two drivers. This was a symbol, a moment where the past and the future of Formula One collided with brutal clarity. Hamilton, the seasoned titan, the record breaker, the warrior scarred from 1,000 battles, facing off against Norris, the insurgent talent, fearless, irreverent, and unapologetically modern. It wasn't about a single qualifying session anymore. It was about legacy, respect, power. And beneath it all, a deeper truth loomed. Hamilton was done playing diplomat. The gloves were off. The fire was real. And the paddock knew it. This wasn't the end of a fight. It was the beginning of a war. The moment qualifying concluded in Barcelona, the temperature on social media surged to explosive levels. Within minutes, the digital world ignited with fury, suspicion, allegiance, and outrage. Hashtags exploded across every platform. Hashtag Hamilton blocked. Hashtag Lando the Menace. Hashtag Barcelona blowup. Hashtag Sabotage in Sector 3. Hashtag Orange Curtain. Hashtag Wasted Lap. All climbing the trending charts in over 20 countries simultaneously. Millions of fans across continents weren't just commenting. They were dissecting, slow-mo rewinding, screen recording, cross-referencing radio transcripts, syncing GPS overlays, comparing sector deltas frame by frame with religious intensity. Communities on Reddit launched megathreads with forensic analysis. TikTokers went live, stitching telemetry data with Hamilton's onboard reaction. Twitter became a war zone, with F1 fans dividing themselves into armed camps, each convinced of their truth, each unwilling to concede an inch. What ignited this chaos wasn't just the fact that Lando Norris appeared to impede Lewis Hamilton in the final sector of his flying lap. It was the how, the when, and the why. In the brutal final minutes of Q3, Hamilton was on a lap that many insiders believed could have placed him squarely on the front row. His first two sectors were purple. His trajectory through turn 10 was surgical. The tension was palpable. But as he barreled into Sector 3, he found himself staring at the rear wing of Norris's McLaren. A McLaren that didn't yield, didn't vanish off the racing line, didn't back off with the urgency the situation demanded. The onboard footage told one story: Hamilton visibly lifting, the flow of the lap breaking, his momentum dying. The look on his face in the cockpit: disbelief, then fury. On the cool-down lap, his voice crackled with restrained rage over team radio, questioning whether he'd just been strategically sacrificed. And the internet wasted no time filling in the blanks. Clips of Norris's telemetry surfaced almost instantly, with fans claiming he received a delta warning at the start of Sector 3 but continued pushing. The conspiracy grew. Did McLaren intentionally keep him out longer to block Hamilton? Was this an act of subtle sabotage masked as procedural execution? Did Lando lift just enough to stay within the gray area of legality, but not enough to avoid interfering with Lewis's lap? More aggressive theorists suggested team strategy meetings from earlier in the weekend had been leaked and that Hamilton's pace had McLaren engineers quietly panicked. Others pointed to a supposed look exchange between Andrea Stella and a senior Red Bull strategist near the media pen, as if the sabotage was not just a McLaren play but part of a larger tactical chessboard designed to derail Mercedes' resurgence. The speculation was infinite, and it was feeding itself with every passing second. But not everyone saw malice. An equally loud faction of fans rushed to defend Norris. They referenced the absence of a blue flag warning, the onboards showing Lando looking in his mirrors, the fact that he stayed on the racing line rather than weaving. McLaren released telemetry charts showing that Norris had technically complied with Delta instructions. Team radio snippets were posted, showing engineers telling Lando he was clear to push. According to them, it was all within regulation. Just a case of bad timing. Just one of those things. Racing luck. Nothing more. But that explanation fell flat in the face of Hamilton's body language after he exited the car. The stiffness in his jaw. The refusal to shake hands with anyone in papaya orange. The clipped tone in his post-session interview. His words were measured, but the emotion underneath was unmistakable. What had once been a playful, respectful relationship between Hamilton and Norris was now cracking. The jovial banter, the joking interviews, the shared admiration between generations gone. In its place, tension, mutual suspicion. A growing awareness that both men are now locked in the same space on the track and in the hierarchy of British motorsport history. For years, Lando had been the young gun in Lewis's shadow. Now he's a contender in his own right. For Lewis, this is likely one of the final chapters in a legendary career. For Lando, it's the rise. The torch can only be passed if both parties are willing, and suddenly, it looks like Hamilton has no intention of handing anything over, especially not like this. The paddock is buzzing with murmurs that this flashpoint could reshape the dynamics of the season. Engineers on rival teams are already bracing for wheel-to-wheel combat between the two that could make past rivalries look tame. One strategist whispered to a journalist that we're witnessing the opening scene of the next great F1 war. And it wasn't hyperbole. Hamilton and Norris are now orbiting each other on every time sheet. Their teams are rising in tandem. Their pace is converging. And what once would have been shrugged off as a racing incident has become a scar that could define every future duel they share. No more favors. No more yielding into turn one. Every overtake will now carry baggage. Every qualifying battle will be charged with memory. Every missed apex will be interpreted as a statement. The media circus has already pounced. Press conference seating charts are being altered. Journalists are sharpening their questions, trying to draw out the friction. Paparazzi are positioning themselves near hotel lobbies, hoping to capture the body language between the two drivers when they cross paths. Podcast hosts are releasing emergency episodes with titles like The Block Heard Round the World, and From Bromance to Bloodsport. Analysts are already penciling in the next race as a pressure cooker, with many predicting that if the two find themselves side by side at any point, the gloves will come off, figuratively and perhaps literally. The FIA, caught in the center of this maelstrom, is reportedly reviewing footage not just from the qualifying session, but from previous weekends to establish whether patterns exist. Investigators are looking into team-to-driver communication to see if there were any coded messages or suspicious gaps in instruction. McLaren has gone into defense mode, issuing statements, releasing data, insisting there was no wrongdoing. Mercedes, by contrast, has stayed unusually quiet, feeding speculation that they're preparing a formal protest or quietly rallying evidence to launch a broader accusation. In a sport where perception is as powerful as performance, silence sometimes speaks louder than words. The emotional impact is spreading like wildfire. Social media profiles of both drivers have been bombarded, some with support, others with venom. Norris's Instagram comments are flooded with snake emojis. Hamilton's defenders are calling for Norris to be penalized retroactively, demanding the FIA grow a spine and uphold the spirit of fair play. Others are calling for rules reform, automatic penalties for any driver impeding during final sector flying laps, regardless of intent. The debate has extended beyond fans and into the realm of ethics, fairness, and the integrity of competition. Sponsors are watching closely. Broadcasters are adjusting storylines. Every single entity tied to the sport is now re-evaluating the fallout from this one incident, because it's not just a moment, it's a movement. And what lies ahead is unknown. But it's not quiet. It's not calm. It's not resolved. Every race from this moment forward will be loaded with anticipation. Every session will feel like a potential eruption. Every radio call, every slipstream, every braking zone will feel like it carries 10 times the consequence it did before. Because what began as a qualifying inconvenience has detonated into a full-blown rivalry, with stakes that reach far beyond lap times. Pride, legacy, reputation. Everything is now on the line. And neither man looks willing to blink first. Barcelona was meant to be a statement. A place where performance upgrades, aerodynamic enhancements, and relentless simulator hours would translate into lap time domination. Teams arrived with high expectations, media outlets buzzed with optimism, and fans filled the stands waiting for a spectacle of speed and precision. Yet what unfolded at the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya went far beyond anything a wind tunnel or data model could predict. Because in the heart of qualifying, with the track temperature rising and tension mounting, Formula One was hit with a drama that will echo through the paddock for the rest of the season, and possibly far beyond. It was supposed to be just another qualifying session. Strategic tire runs, slipstream games, and milliseconds on the line. But what started as a technical battle quickly unraveled into what some insiders are already calling the most controversial incident of the year. Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time world champion with nerves of steel and a legacy etched in motorsport history, was left visibly shaken, confused, and, as we would all soon hear, furious. Because just minutes before what should have been his final flying lap, the Mercedes garage erupted into controlled chaos. Whispers turned into shouts, telemetry screens flashed inconsistencies, and suddenly, all eyes were no longer on the stopwatch. They were on the man in the black and turquoise helmet, sitting in the cockpit, radio silent, until he wasn't. Initial reports pointed to a systems failure. Others speculated a setup error. But within minutes, Rumors exploded across social media, and even seasoned journalists couldn't ignore the unthinkable. Was this sabotage? Was someone, somewhere within the tightly controlled universe of Formula One, trying to derail Hamilton's run at Barcelona? The idea alone was outrageous, and yet, the pieces started aligning in ways that made people question everything. Onboards were analyzed frame by frame. Team radio from other drivers picked up strange chatter. Even rival teams were caught on camera, exchanging looks that said more than words ever could. And when Hamilton finally broke radio silence, the entire paddock held its breath. His voice, usually measured and composed, cut through the airwaves like a scalpel. "Did you guys know about this before I went out? Because if you did, if anyone knew." The rest of the message was bleeped, censored for broadcast. But by then, the damage was already done. Not to his car, not to his lap time, but to the fragile trust between driver and team, between man and machine, between past and present. As engineers scrambled for answers and team principals rushed into hushed meetings behind tinted motorhome doors, fans online were already connecting dots. Who had access to the garage at that time? Why was there a discrepancy between Hamilton's data and Russell's? Why did Norris, of all people, seem unusually quiet after his pole lap? Questions piled up faster than a Red Bull in clean air. And that brings us to Lando Norris, a fan favorite, social media darling, and the man who, until now, had been seen as the cheerful, harmless young gun climbing the ranks. But this weekend changed that perception forever. Because as Hamilton's car failed to reach full potential and the world watched him drop down the order, Norris rose. Effortlessly. Confidently. Too confidently, some might argue. And when asked about the incident in the post-qualifying interviews, his answer was a short shrug followed by, "That's racing." No sympathy. No acknowledgement. Just a smirk that left fans, especially Hamilton's loyal supporters, enraged. Now, with the media digging deeper and Mercedes refusing to make a formal statement, the tension is suffocating. Was it internal politics? A rogue engineer? Or was it something even more orchestrated? A psychological game meant to unsettle Hamilton just as he was finding his rhythm again? We don't have the answers yet. But one thing is certain, Hamilton does not forget. He does not forgive. And when he feels betrayed, the gloves come off. The radio message, the part that wasn't censored, has already gone viral. Millions have replayed it. Fans have dissected every syllable, every breath. "You don't play games with me," he said, his voice trembling with barely restrained fury. "You don't pull this in my car. Not here. Not now." And then, silence. Barcelona was supposed to be about speed, about upgrades, about the battle for the front row. Instead, it gave us a civil war brewing within Mercedes, a rival rising in the shadows, and a Hamilton more determined, and more dangerous, than ever before. As the paddock packs up and heads to the next race, the only thing more unpredictable than the weather is what Hamilton will do next. And you can bet, no matter what team you support, you'll be watching. Because this isn't over. This isn't done. This is personal now. And when Lewis Hamilton takes things personally, history tends to be made. Or destroyed.